I haven't told.
Go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead.
continue. I haven't told my story at all. Like especially since I moved to Seattle, so I'm like super nervous about that as
So
well.
that's one thing before I even introduce you. I just started recording just for so I don't forget because I be
Okay.
high and I really will forget. I've done that like twice. I'm like, oh, did you record? No, you didn't. Um, no, I've known you like for almost what 2 or 3 years, and I just found out you were in foster care, and I
Mm,
was like, how did I not know this
right.
about you?
I
So
know. I feel like I don't do enough work, or I don't
no, no,
talk about
no.
it a lot because I just feel like it's something that I've learned to grow and
We're,
move forward from. It
we're
used to be
gonna
my
speak on
story, but
that.
it's not the story anymore.
We're gonna speak on that. So hold on to that. I'm gonna do my intro and then introduce you, and then we'll lead in. Actually, that's I want to start off with that because
Okay.
I'm gonna save it. 5, 4, 3. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Wards of the State. This one's really special for me because not only is it a local in Seattle, but it's also like a fellow media person who's like been doing the work. Um, their name is Bennett. Bennett knows on Instagram. I am so honored
Yes.
to have you on my show. How are
Yay.
you?
I'm doing well. I'm so excited to be on the show, like I'm ready for a fruitful conversation, and I feel
So
like there's a lot of learning points, a lot for me to learn and to teach in the process. So thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
no, no problem. Bennett is like a national producer for some of the largest shows like The Jubal Show, Cube 93.3. He's a grad student, traffic reporter. Like I thought I had
Mhm.
a large, long resume, but yours is like almost making me, it's putting me a run for my money. It's giving me a run for my money.
It's getting there. It's getting there. Yeah, I work at iHeartMedia and I do a lot of things. So, producing, I'm on air, Cube overnights, listen to me getting ratchet overnights in Seattle. And I do traffic reports as well. So, I'm just doing a lot of work in the media field, and I'm just like trying to learn and grow and put new faces that belong and that are needed in that space as well.
Right, right. Well, speaking of putting new faces and voices that belong in the space, one reason why I reached out to you is because I recently just found out like a couple months ago that you were in foster care, and before we were getting prepared for the show, you were sharing saying that like it's not something like you don't let that be your person, which I love. But what I wanted to say is that we need more men talking about their foster care experience.
Right.
And it doesn't
Absolutely.
have to be who you are. It could be just a stepping stone of where you've gone. But there are so many women who share, or so many people who identify as women who share their stories um, and foster care, and it's kind of getting uneven when like men experience it too, and people who identify as men experience it a little bit differently than women. So that's why I was really excited, especially as I mean, do you consider I consider you a black man? I think as a black man,
Oh yeah, definitely.
because some
100%.
people in Seattle be like, I am not a black man. I was like, okay, what are you? They're like,
I'm definitely black.
I'm an African American. I'm like, sis, that's the same thing. No, but as a black man, I think it's something that we definitely should share more. So I'm excited to learn and hear about your lived experience. So I'd like to just go right off the bat, like,
Yeah.
what happened? Tell us, like, where did it begin? Where did your
It's time to buckle
foster
up.
care
It's a long
begin?
story. Like I said, I haven't told this story in such a long time. So let's just jump right into it. So my father, he's from Liberia. He's like fresh off the boat. He like moved here in the 80s. And my mom, she's Irish from Boston. I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, to beautiful mother and father. And before I was born, my mom was actually diagnosed with a really rare neurologic disorder. So before I was even born, she was diagnosed with Huntington's disease.
Mhm.
So she wasn't even really expected to be around for a long time after birth. She wasn't even expected to give birth. It was going to be a very difficult birth. So, when I get here, born to, a Liberian father, 100% Irish mother, in a very small town, a Canadian town in Rhode Island, or outside of Providence, Rhode Island, Woonsocket, Rhode Island. So we get really, really deep. So born to these two, and like I said, my mother, she was already diagnosed with Huntington's disease
Mhm.
when I was born, and my father, he had to support the family. He was a truck driver, so he traveled nationally at the time, And, with my mother being diagnosed with Huntington's disease, and for those symptoms to uh, just arrive so quickly after I was born, there were some complications, and my father wasn't around because he was driving the country nationally. So the first time I was in foster care, um, I was probably around one from what I'm told. I could go
Okay.
back and look at the records, but I was around one when I went to foster care the first time, and it was because of some issues that my mother had, and they deemed her unable to take care of me. And my father, he was gone, being a national truck driver. So that was my first time going into the system. And when my
Hmm.
father got back, he like really had to. He tried to change his lifestyle from being the sole provider of the family with a disabled wife. And while this is going on, my mom is like deteriorating from the disease. My father, from the stories he tells me, he was out working, but I also have my memory of him being out, living his life.
Being a
You know how
hoe.
it goes. You know how it goes. You feel me? So, my father, when he got back, he worked really hard for me to get to, he worked really hard to gain custody once again when he arrived back from wherever he was driving the country. Shortly after that, my father, he had a really hard time with my mother. She was just deteriorating so quickly. By the time I was like a toddler, by 4, she was already in like a nursing home.
Mm.
So that left my father, being the sole provider, the only one that was there. And like I said, he was a national truck driver, and he had his own life. He was doing his thing, and he might have not had the healthiest life. So because of that, before I even turned 5, I was sent back into the foster care system once again.
Oh, so you're in twice before you're in the foster care system 2 times before you even hit 7.
Yes. So
That's
yeah,
crazy.
before I even hit 7, I'm in the foster care system twice. And I think that like because of the first time, once the system is on your back, especially a black man who's
Hmm.
doing his thing, they are on top of it the whole time. And my parents, they faced a lot of issues with like a lot of race issues, being an interracial couple with the situation that they were in. So I think that like might have added to the fuel of the case that the state had against my father. So the second time I went into foster care, I don't really remember much from the first time. I do, from what I understand, I was, like most foster kids, passed around numerous times until I got back with my father. But I do remember the second time I went to foster care, and whew, we went through it. I went through like probably over a dozen foster homes. I wasn't in any that were like super stable or more than like a
And
few
that was
months.
like at 5 years old. You remember this?
Yes, I remember
And
this. It
there
was just like
was a
moving
dozen,
around.
a dozen at 5 years old.
We're not even done yet.
Oh, I know. I was in 37, so I'm
Ooh.
just like, ooh, let's buckle up, like you said. So,
Right. So at that point I'm like past the dozen mark where like my father, the second time I went to foster care, and from what I remember, he left me alone. You feel me? Like he was out and about doing his thing, and like someone found out, or from what I was the man at the house of the house at that point. So I was answering phones and I was doing things that a
do
5-year-old
you have
shouldn't have done.
do you have younger siblings or was it
No,
just
I'm
you?
only child between my
Oh,
only
okay.
child
Well,
between my father and my mother. They both have kids from previous marriage and marriages.
now were you taking care of kids? Were there other kids removed when you were removed, or was just you by yourself?
It depended, like some foster homes I would go into, and it would be, a family that already has their own biological kids, and I would be, just like the foster kid that was there for a couple of weeks, or, another home. It
Oh, no, no,
might
no.
be.
I'm asking you your siblings. Did you like were you removed with any of your siblings or was it just
No,
you?
absolutely not. So like my siblings from my parents' previous marriages are all a lot older than me.
Oh,
So
okay, so you
they're
was a young baby.
grown.
You was the
Yeah, I
younger
was the
baby.
youngest. I was the one that wasn't supposed to be there. I was like the uh-oh, like we didn't plan for this. My
Mm.
parents were like in their 40s at the time. So
Oh, wow.
right. So it was only me. So Second time I went to foster care, I was like moving it from house to house, and you know the situation. Sometimes you're there with a group of other foster kids. Sometimes you're there for like they'll tell you you're there for a week and then they move you. Sometimes they tell you that you're there for 2 months and then they move you 2 weeks later. Like I was just being moved around and put into so many different situations.
Yep.
Um, so that happened, and then I think I was in the system for maybe a couple of years at that point. So I got really used to like moving around and going to different schools. And by the time I was like 8, yeah, that's when my father regained custody of me again.
Wow. So was he working towards reunification? Like, was he working towards getting you back, or was it just like, oh, I'm fine now. Let me try to get him out?
He was, I'm pretty sure the whole time he was working towards it. I don't know the story. Like I'll never know the 100% truth of like what happened or why I was in foster care this second time for so long. But it did take for about a couple of years for him to regain custody after a while. And I know for him, you know, it was always something that he wanted to do, because when I talk about my father and I say he had like his own life, he wasn't like an abuser of like drugs or alcohol. He had a really like he was really stable, but I think that sometimes that WAP might have like taken him off path, and he might have been, you know, dabbling in like a lot of things that he shouldn't have been doing while he had a kid at home, you know. So
True.
um I mean, he's like my dad is like straight from Liberia. He had like 5 wives there. Moved here, was like really fascinated by white women, and like looked at it like a candy store and left my ass behind. But that's
So
what happened there.
so you are a couple years into foster care and your dad regains you back. What
Mhm.
happens then? Do you stay with him into
I
like
did.
okay, so
Yeah.
was that experience
That was
going back
great. Like I
home?
remember like that was great experience. I probably lived with him. Like I said, he regained custody shortly after I turned 1. So maybe I was like a toddler at this time, and I lived with him until I was like, oh my gosh. Well, okay. It's a little blurry. All right. I don't remember the first time he regained custody because I was so young. I was a baby at that point. But the second time he regained custody, I had to be 7 or 8. And I do remember moving back home, and my memories with him during this short period of time, it had to be earlier than 7 or 8. It had to be like maybe, I say 7 or 8. You could cut this out, all this, but I say 7 or 8 because I remember getting back home and it was Christmas time, and it was also like New Year's. I remember it like solely
Hmm.
being back at home with my father, like just getting back, you know, Christmas gifts and like just the feeling of being home. I
Uh-huh.
say 7 or 8 because I want to say it was 2000, but then when I think of the trajectory of the story, um,
You
I
know,
had to
I
be younger.
I totally understand you because I be like that with my story too. People be like, "Well, you said you was 9, but now you're saying you
Right.
was 7." I was like, "Listen, trauma is real and it
Mm-hmm.
erases some exact memories, but it happened between the fall and the winter." You know,
Right.
I was like, I can't give you an exact year all the time, but it was the fall and the winter. You know.
Like I said, it was like New Year's. I remember getting back and, you know, just being a kid and like being in foster care for so long and like going through that trauma at such a young age and just being like, yes, like I get to go back home with my father. And I just remember that being like such a great memory. Just getting back home during Christmas and New Year's. And I think I lived with my father for probably like, it had to be a few years looking at the trajectory of the story, but like during this time, like it was great. I loved living with my father, and he taught me a lot and he brought me everywhere. But also I do remember there was times during this period where he would like take off, and again, I'm like the man of the house, so like I remember being like a kid and having to taking care of myself, like making myself dinner and putting myself to bed and like waking up the
Wow.
next morning and getting ready for school the next day. So like during this period, like he was around, but he was not around,
Yeah, I can
you know?
understand.
So he regained custody, but he was still doing the same exact things. Um, the final time that I went into foster care, so
Woo! This is the third time,
There's a
girl.
third time. We're going three
I
times,
thought we
three
was happily
times.
ever after. I thought we were gonna live one of those Lizzie
No,
McGuire moments.
not at
No.
all. So the third time, this one's juicy. The third time that he went into foster care, I was really used to like living with my father at this point, and like, you know, he had a girlfriend that we moved in with. They had kids, so like finally I had like a family unit, between my dad's girlfriend, their kids. Like we did the whole Disney World thing. Finally I went to school with like kids that I knew. Like I had like stability at this time. And there was one time where my father brought us to New York with one of his side pieces. She was a janky old thing, but she brought us to New York with one of his side pieces, got us like a really nice hotel, and just like disappeared. So we're in New York in a hotel. I'm with this like side piece. She's kind of janky.
Wait, he left you with
He
her?
left us there. Like
I
he
thought
just
he left you by
disappeared.
yourself when
No, with
with the janky hoe.
the janky girl. Like, yeah. So we're in New York, and like she doesn't know what to do, and we're in New York in this hotel, and like he disappears.
How
And
long was
then
he
like
gone?
he had to be gone for like a week,
Oh,
because I remember the hotel started like taking care of us, and it got to the point where like his side piece was like, yo, like I'm going back home, you know? And she's like, I'm going to bring you back home. Like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to bring you to your stepmom's house, AKA your father's main piece? Or do you want to go home with me, the side piece? And obviously, I don't know this lady. So I'm like, yo, bring me to my stepmom's house, AKA his girlfriend's. Well, they dropped me off there, and it's like battle of, they're fighting each other. They're arguing. It's a big thing because my dad's missing. Here comes the side piece with
with his
the son.
son.
It was just some hot mess.
That is some
And
love and hip hop drama. If you've ever written a love and hip hop drama.
it was a lot. And his girlfriend actually weaponized DCYF and weaponized foster care. And I remember her being like, well, if he doesn't want to take care of his kids and he wants to cheat on me, then I'm going to put Bennett back in foster care. And that's what she did.
No.
Yeah. So that night, like hours later, here comes DCYF. Yeah. So then I was put back into the state's custody for a third time. And I remember that year I was probably like fourth, fifth grade. Man, I went to like 6 or 7 different schools that fourth grade year.
That's a
Just
shame.
jumping from place to place. And get this, while I'm going through that process, my father and the same woman that like called foster care on me, they take a trip to Canada. So I'm going through the process of foster care, and I'm like getting switched from home to home to home. And then they took their trip to Canada, actually skipped a visit to come see me to go to Canada. And my father got stuck in Canada
How did
because
he get stuck in Canada?
he's from Liberia, and he didn't have the right paperwork going over the border. So now his ass was stuck. So at that point, he couldn't fight to regain custody. He couldn't do anything. So I was in the system. So that's what happened. And I moved around a few more times.
This is literally like, if you weren't telling me this is like a bad Tyler Perry movie. Like when I tell you,
crazy.
like,
Oh my
this
gosh.
is like a skit that Tyler Perry wrote in the middle of the night and was like, and the dad's gonna get stuck in Canada. Like what? And then your mom's already passed. So
yes.
it's like no one's gonna fight for you. Oh my goodness, Bennett.
Right. So I was left in the system, and at this point, it's no longer like we need like a place for this kid to stay for a few months until his dad. It was like, all right, well, he's part of like, we need to find a place for him. And, luckily I was moved around at this point. By the time I was moved to my final home, it was like 24 foster homes over the span of like age 1 to the final time, like when I finally moved to my final home at age 9. So lots of moving around. And yeah, at this home, I was like brought here, brought to like my home and like met my new family and stuff. And they explained to them like, yeah, like his father's in Canada and he's not coming back and he can't really fight or regain custody from Canada. So like, do you want to adopt him? I lied then. They said, do you want to adopt him? And they were going to adopt me, but my father was able to fight. He found a good lawyer that was able to fight and they gained guardianship when I was 10. So when I was 10, I gained guardianship and I had this like new family to, learn and grow with. And I love my family so much. I love my family. But also there was a lot of like growing pains and traumas there as well. So yeah, that's kind of like my journey through foster care. Um, for the most part.
We're going to take a quick break, Bennett. When we get back, we're going to talk about the fog that comes in guardianship and that comes in adoption. You kind of hit on it a little bit where you're saying there were some growing pains. We call it the fog in our realm. We're
Okay.
also going to talk about the flaws in the system and the trauma that people endure after foster care. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back, guys.
Awesome.
I don't really do real breaks. I just say breaks and then
You say it's a break. Oh my gosh.
I post edited it in.
Hopefully you're not like I'm like playing with my nose. It's itchy. Hopefully you don't get like a lot of clips with me picking my nose or something.
No, you're good.
It's
You're
okay.
good. The audio or the video rarely ever comes out. It's only for commercials and stuff, or sometimes on my
Okay.
Patreon, but only the audio is what I focus on. Okay, ready? Five, four. Oh, y'all, we back.
We back.
Oh, Bennett, I knew you, but I didn't know anything about you. I
All
really feel
right.
like I just want to say thank you so much already just for sharing what you've shared so far because that's important. And you didn't get into deep detail about each foster home, and that's not even important. It's just the fact that you are even opening up to share that you have those experiences with 24 foster homes at least.
Mhm.
I think it's important, like I said in the beginning of the show, for Black men to share our experiences. So because there's other little Black boys in the system that need to see that, hey, I can make it out too. Because as Black men, we already face so much in society just being Black men. So with your experience in the system, as many foster homes that you went through, what do you think the flaws are? What are some flaws that you think you can distinctly see and that you would change if you could?
Distinctly. This is so much to go into, but one of the things that I would like, for the most part, I feel for the most part, I know that there's a lot of families, adults, parents that sign up to foster children, and whether they are ignorant or they just don't care, they do it for the wrong reasons. And a lot of the time, like a lot of, for example, some foster parents, they don't think that like those 2 weeks that they foster a child could really make or break a child. So they don't give them the same love or support that is actually needed. A lot of times these people are getting paychecks for certain things and they're not using them to support these children. And that's
Yeah.
like a huge flaw in the foster care system that, some of these parents are just not doing what they should be doing when they take these children into their homes. You're bringing a child into your home and you got to make sure that you're giving them the same love, support, as anybody else that steps into your home. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. Another huge issue is like, I don't know why it happens. I just don't understand, but a lot of these kids are just moved from place to place to place to place to place. And like, like my story, like I moved around a lot as well, but I don't know what the difference was with me. But a lot of kids are really, 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 it impacts people differently. And I've seen so many foster kids just go through this system and not make it out, or, they are victims of the system and not getting the, like I said, the right support that's needed. Um, there's no stability when you're moving from house to house, and like little things like that just impact children who are developing at such a prime age and such an important time in their lives, it makes a
Yeah.
lifelong impact that like, we're really left to dealt with after the fact, or we're really left to deal with after the
Absolutely.
fact.
I tell people all the time, especially when they ask, going back to why were you moved so much? I couldn't tell you. Like, I knew that I had I knew that I was I won't say troubled kid, but like I was an inner city kid. Like I was an inner
Mhm.
city kid. I did ghetto things with my ghetto friends because that's just what we do. I do hood rat things with my friends. But
Ah,
overall, when I look right, when I look back at it, I'm like, I was just a kid. Like I was just a kid. It
right.
wasn't like I was breaking into houses and vandalizing. It was just me going and riding bikes and maybe stealing some now and laters from the store. But like,
Mhm.
I don't know why I got moved from so much. I really don't know why I got moved. I think a majority of us don't understand why we got moved so much. And then on top of that, that what that did was for me, being moved so much gave me the most abandonment issues as an adult. Like my abandonment issues that I'm still working through with my therapist and like with my life coach, it's just like out of this world. It's hard for me to maintain friendships because my expectations for friends are really unrealistic,
Yeah.
and most adults are gonna be like, I'm not,
I'm not
I'm
dealing with
not,
that.
I'm not dealing.
Not doing it.
I got to come to every event, every birthday party. I can't miss it, and if I do miss it, I got to give you 72 hours in advance. Like, like being a friend with me is almost like it's like a business, like a receipt, like a business contract. Like if you
No, yeah.
cancel, you need to give me 72 hours notice, and it has to be written. It can't be verbal.
Oh my gosh.
Because I'm protecting my trauma.
100%, 100%. I feel like a lot of like I just said, like because through the system, I feel like I was always like a really good kid, but now that you point out that like you were the trouble kid, I do think that had something to do with like the reason why I moved around a lot, but I was really really a good kid, and I noticed that like my once I once my parents gained legal guardianship, because in that home I did see foster kids come and go, and I seen a lot of the foster children who had like so much trauma and were problem children in that case. And I think for me, it kind of like worked both ways, where it was like, all right, well, Bennett's like a really good kid, he doesn't act out on like his trauma, but also at the same time, because of that, I feel like my foster parents were really really tough on me,
Mm.
because they didn't want me to be like they just didn't want me to be a trouble kid. But yeah, damn, the trauma, like I said, I just said like I'm not like the other kids and I'm not a trouble, nah, like the trauma is real, and I feel like you don't even realize that type of trauma until you get into these deep relationships in your life. Like I didn't realize a lot of my trauma until I got with my husband. I was like,
Yeah.
damn, there's like abandonment issues, too much independence at the wrong time, abandonment issues, codependence. Like there's
I
so
call it
much trauma.
toxic codependence. Like I didn't realize how, and I was married. I've been married to my husband for 11 years, and we were recently separated, and I didn't realize how much trauma was connected to my trauma and my experience with foster care, with my abandonment issues, with my high expectations, with my toxic codependency. That's a lot for another human being to take on and be like, and
Absolutely.
still love you every day, but then be like, oh, but then you know what? He may need to go do some little things on the side, because a human being can only take so much when you're not willing to work on yourself. And at that moment, in those years, I thought that I had done all the work. I was that kid that's the world said I wouldn't be no one. And now I've made a name for myself, and I'm this, and I wrote a book, and I'm popular. Okay, you can be all those things, but baby, you still hurt. Okay,
Right.
you
Right.
you can be all those things, but you're still hurt, and that's affecting your relationships in your life. So that's something even in the last year I've had to realize is, oh, I'm still hurt, and I still have to go to therapy, and I still have to talk to my therapist and my counselor about the things that foster care does and continues to do to my life. Like it'll pop up randomly. Like one thing I did want to cover is, do you have any reunification with your father now? Did he ever get out of Canada?
Oh, so that's like another part of the story. Like, okay, so boom, like I was like first generation of like all of my families to go to college. So like I kind of put myself through college and made sure I got like those scholarships and did what I had to do to, put myself through college. And, being the first generation, I didn't have the support from like my family, my guardians, my father, or like my mother's family. It was like really on my own. So when I got out of when I got out of when I graduated from college, and it was like time for me to, move back home and like figure it out from there. um that's where I like kind of like had some tensions with my legal guardians, because at this point I'm like 23, 22, 23, and I'm working like a part-time radio job, and they want me to pay money. They want me to pay them bills and stuff. And not only foster kids face this, like I feel like everybody faces this, at a lot of people in our community face this, if you know what I'm saying, where it's like you're 18, you got to pay them bills.
Yeah.
And
And that's one reason I believe that the Black community cannot build generational wealth, because we expect our children to start paying bills at 18. Meanwhile, T- Tanner can stay at home until he's 33,
right,
and
until
then
he
save
has a
all
real
his
job.
money. And then he gets a big boy job. And then now because honestly, I just started making like big boy money. So did my husband. If we could have stayed at home for these last 10 years and say, instead of spending all our
Hello.
money.
So
But
like, it was like, if you're not going to pay these bills, you going to get out. And it was like, I can't pay these bills either. Like, either way, I work at radio part-time. Like, I'm not going to be able to pay the bills. So I had no choice but to leave. But at the same time, the same exact time, uh guess who comes back into the United States, found their way into the United States at the same exact time? Benny Kofa. He's back in the United States, and like, he calls me and gets in contact with me, and he's like, just because for the last few years before I graduated from college, I was able to get in contact with my father, and visit him. Actually, he visited me. Anyway, we got in contact right before I graduated college. He made it back to the United States. A little time later, I'm kicked out of my legal guardian's house.
mm-hmm.
He calls me. He's in Seattle, Washington, across the country. And he's like, yo, like, I'm back in the United States. I would really, really like to, like, you know, get to know my son. And, at the time, I didn't have a place to go. I just got kicked out. And he was like, I'm in Seattle. It's a really great market for what you do. Come on out here. So I took that as an opportunity. And interestingly, I just feel like no matter what happens with foster kids, they always, as soon as they turn 18, it doesn't matter what the situation is, they all, for one reason or the other, they're gonna
Always go
find their
home.
way back to their parents, their
Yep.
biological parents. I've seen it in every case with like parents who do everything, and they don't even know they're adopted or foster kids, or like they've been dealing with their parents all their life. When foster kids turn 18, there's just something that always drives them back to their parents. They have to know, they have to get those years back. And that was like kind of my way to, move with my father. I didn't think it was going to happen because of my situation, but here's Benny Cole for calling me, and I needed a place to stay. And I was out. I already wanted to move to the West Coast for radio. So I was like, this is perfect. Moved here for a week, and two issues. Me and him are a week apart. And I learned really quickly that we're almost like identical. So that did not work at all. Two, my father's, he's from Liberia, he's from Africa. So he's like strict African parenting. And I'm like 100% like, I grew up here. I'm not putting up, like, I'm not doing it. I couldn't
Yep.
deal with that. And he was also treating me like a child after missing so much of my
In your
life.
childhood. Yep. I know how that is.
He treated me like, little Bennett that he left in the hotel with Miss Janky Woman. And like, that was not who I was anymore. So, it didn't even last for like 2 weeks. So after that, he kicked me out.
Oh no.
So, I had to like, really, I was like,
So
I
you were
had to
out in
work.
Seattle by
Yeah, I had to
yourself.
work my way, like everything by myself. Yeah. So
Wow.
that's what happened. And it got really messy. It was like super toxic between him, and I had to like separate myself. It got really, really toxic. And I've been here for about 5 years, but for those first like 4 years, I didn't even like talk to him. Like, it was just way too toxic and like too much for me. And um I feel like him being gone for so long, he wanted to, make up for the years that he missed out on. And, you know, I'm a grown man now, so it really didn't work out. And he was also on the same time as, it was the same reason I left Rhode Island, but it was here in Seattle. So, yeah, I was back out, had to grind. And like once I regained my stability, it got to a point where it was like, yo, this is like the only biological parent that you have on earth. My parents are old. Like I said, they had me when they were like in their 40s. My dad's like in his 70s, really, really healthy. Really, he looks really good, which is great, but like he's older. So it got to a point where I became like anxious, and I was like, like you live in the same city as your father. And like, regardless of like your past and everything that's happened from foster care to like the lack of stability when you moved to Seattle, Washington, it was like, you got to put that behind you at some point to grow and to start working on that trauma that we were speaking about. So now me and my father were in a great place, and we hang out sometimes, we go out to dinners, and like it's really, really great. The space that we're in now is like really healthy, and it's just like really beneficial to my growth.
I hope.
um
I
and I
love
just like
that.
appreciate the whole process. And a lot of times he'll like break down, and he'll be like, I'm like so sorry for like everything that has happened. And like, he has his story, I have my what I remember, what I'm told. But regardless, he's really apologetic and really grateful that I still accomplished everything that I did through the system. And I really appreciate the place we're in now. And like I always tell everyone, I'm like, yo, I would do it all over again, 100%. Like, just I can't see myself growing up anyway, other way than
Well, you
through
get
the system, a bunch of schools, being that kid at every school, 7 schools every year, like I can't see myself not doing that. And, I'm still working through a lot of the trauma today, a lot of it, and a lot of it is surfacing now because of where I am with like my relationship with my past, with the people that are around me, and like, just where I am in life.
one thing that you said is that your dad came back to you, and that gave I know that gave me hope because my dad just tried to stab me 2 weeks ago. So,
I seen that. I'm so sorry.
but no, but you said that if your dad can change and he lost you 3 times in the system, like my dad still has hope. And my dad's not 70. My dad's only like 48 if he survives to 70. But that gave me hope. So I know it gave some kids hope. And just like I'm proud of you, Bennett. I'm proud of the person. And especially I was proud of you before I heard the story, just of you being a good human being. And
Thank you.
I believe I have a really good judge of people's character. And I've always just seen a light in you, and that's what that light was. I didn't know what it
Thank
was,
you.
but that's what that light. I can always, it's like when twins know twins. Like I was like foster kid. I feel
Is
you,
that
a
him?
foster kid.
Right. Is it? Is it
And
him?
it's
Is it
your
him?
light because I feel like foster kids have a lot to prove, and sometimes like you said, the trauma takes our lives, but then sometimes we take life.
Mm-hmm.
I love seeing it. I love seeing, and this is like I've had some amazing people on the show. The first episode, she was Miss Evergreen State, Miss Jamaica. We've had some people, but then on the same time, we've had people where foster care has permanently affected their life, and they're having medical issues. And so, like I said, it's foster care is not a monolith, and it's a huge diaspora of different experiences. Um,
Absolutely.
one last thing before I let you go is you said that there's misconceptions. And I think in your story, I think I even had some misconceptions of what foster care is. Like people say, oh, your parents didn't want you. It's clear that your dad did want you, and your mom did want you. They're old. And I love that after how you explained your story and how much reverence and respect that you did get to both of your parents. You're like, he was doing his thing, but
Right.
he was still a parent, and I was still stable. What are the misconceptions that people have had about your story when you try to tell them that you're in foster care?
Well, you named one right off the back. It's like your parents didn't want you from like when you were born. And it's like, well, no, like obviously there's just like a long story behind that, like why I was in like put in that place. But I feel like a lot of times, like you said, um, foster care isn't monolithic. It's not the same across the board. So when people think that like you're in foster care, a lot of times the response I get is like, oh, you were a group home child,
Mhm.
or like you grew up in a group home, and it's like, no, that's not what happened. So I just think like when it comes to foster care, people just don't know exactly what it is. And even when I explain, like I moved around and jumped from place to place, and then I got legal guardianship, and they're like, oh, so you were adopted. So like I think there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to like what foster care is, and that's a perfect way to explain it. It's not the same across the board. It's different for each case. I think that a lot of times when people hear like, oh, like they were taken from their parents for whatever reason and put here, they're okay now, like they're in a better place. And it's like, that's
No.
not always the case.
Yep.
Sometimes you get taken from one situation that's bad, and you get put in another situation that's
Bad or
equally as
worse.
bad or worse. Man, I got my ass whooped with a switch at one foster home. My father never did that, but he did it when I got back. So it
But
was
you know,
it
did you,
was regular degular.
that was literally my experience. Like my mom was neglectful because she was a drug dealer, but she never was like too abusive.
Mhm.
I was like locked in basements, like burned with bleach, burned with irons, like the thing, like assaulted, like the things that happened to me in homes. I was like, so y'all really just exposed me to all this trauma when my mama just wasn't, like you said, my mama just wasn't always there all the time. Like we,
Right.
like
Like
maybe.
she was out doing like trying to make some money. You're over here beating me for some money.
but
Like, come
but
on now.
I also, this is why I always also go back to, especially in the Black community, maybe if we worked on systemic oppression and generational gaps of wealth, I know my mom wouldn't have had to sell crack cocaine if she actually had opportunities that were afforded to her white counterparts. If we didn't have Jim Crow, if we didn't have the war on drugs, if you look at our country, you're like, oh hell yeah, we finna have a lot of Black foster kids.
Right,
But they
right,
did that on purpose to dismantle the Black family unit, and it worked. And I think it's our generation that's just like, we're not having it, and we finna put
right,
a stop to it. So, and that starts with making sure that the rose-colored glasses come off and that the misconceptions about foster care are corrected. Which is one reason I started this podcast. Which is one reason I have a platform that I do, is because people love to get educated about it. But Bennett, I want to thank you so much for being on the show, and sharing your story. My
of
God,
course.
when you said it, buckle up, you didn't say I had to have three different
I
seat belts.
know, like scene one, two, three, but we gonna keep on going. Like you said earlier, like um, foster care. What did you say? You said foster care something. It gives life. We give life.
We give
What was
foster youth give light. Like we have light. Like we,
mhm.
and that's like foster youth, they don't quit. And there's just something about foster youth. I don't know what it is. Maybe it is trauma. Maybe that is what it is. But it's just like it either kills you or it excels you. Like I've never met a foster youth that was just like, I'm all right. It's
Yeah.
either my life's really fucked up, or I'm really pushing it. And like, so like, which is even trauma in itself, because like
Right. I feel like it's the same both ways. Like sometimes we use the trauma to push ourselves to places that other people really can't see themselves or wouldn't understand. And that's why we have that light. But in the same breath, that same trauma could also be same thing that's stopping us from, moving forward. So I think, for foster youth, anybody listening to, the podcast that might be fostered, or parents or anybody else, I feel like through the battle you're always going to have that trauma that you deal with, and like you just have to like choose to give light and push through it, because if you could do that, you know what I'm saying, if you could do that and work through the trauma, that light is going to shine even brighter than the person next to you, or just anybody else who hasn't had that experience. And that's what I found in my journey thus far. You feel me? Like it's
Mhm.
pushed me to places that like I can't even imagine, but then it's,
Mhm.
again, in the same breath, you feel me? I might get into a fight with someone a little later and be like, oh, damn, there's that trauma again. Like, there I
I
go with these
I was
expectations.
I was just in the news yesterday. Just
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've seen it.
well, guys,
But
you can find Bennett at Bennett Knows on all your social media handles, right, Bennett?
yes, at Bennett Knows across the board, BennettKnows.com, You listen to the Jubal Show. It's
Yes. What are some projects? What are some projects that you're working on? What should people really listen to? I know I listen to you on the radio all the time because
yeah.
you
So
my local DJ.
so yeah, I'm on the Jubal Show, nationally a syndicated show. I work on production behind the scenes. I'm on the mic as well. Morning show. Go to thejubalshow.com, find out where it's playing near you. If you're in Seattle, listen to me on the weekends, overnights, 12 to 6 a.m. on Cube 93.3. So if you're going to the club, in an Uber, hitting up like a party, definitely turn me on. And I also do traffic there. And I'm currently working on a podcast that's going to expand my voice more than, the Jubal Show and ratchet turn up at Cube 93.3. I'm releasing an iHeart podcast. It's going to really focus on things that matter to the Black community, and it's going to be led by a very diverse Black cast. And we're going to be talking about everything from current events in pop culture that impact the Black community, thought-provoking conversations, also everything to Black culture and Black memes. And it's going to be a really Black podcast, and I'm bringing it to iHeartRadio because, like I said, I'm trying to put voices and faces in positions that you may not see them right now. So yeah, that's my big project that I'm working on. It should be out by the end of August, so I'm so excited about that.
I'm excited to let me know when you have it out, and I will love to run some ads for you.
Yes, I was, what, I was actually thinking about talking to you. We got to sit down and talk in person, because that might be something you could help me out with. That's something you could definitely, I mean, that's your job. So
I was like, that's
right.
my business. That's my business.
Right, exactly. So I might reach out to you for that. But Bennett Knows Radio, the podcast, coming very soon. I'm excited.
Wait. Well, like I said, Bennett, thank you for being on the show. You guys know what I say every week: always shine your light. You guys know that's my tagline for my life, because you never know who's watching, and even if it's a little bit dim, you never know how much light that's going to give them to find their way. So you just gave me so much light. Thank you for
you too. Oh my gosh. And before we go, thank you for having me, and thank you for how you use your platform. It's really important. And it just makes me feel good when I see someone like you doing the work that you do. And I'm proud of you. I've been watching you on social media for the last 2 years. Always entertaining, always thought provoking. You always got something going on. But like I said, I'm really proud of you, because you've been through a lot, and you just keep on pushing and shining your light as well. So thank you for that. I can't wait to read your book.
Do you have a copy?
I don't have a copy.
Okay, so
I
you
was
get a
supposed
copy.
to see you.
You get a copy now that you've been on the show.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah. So
I,
just
can I pick it up in person? What's up?
You can pick it up in person.
All right, let me know when. So, let me know when, and I'll come get it for sure.
Yep, I was going to offer you either a hoodie, a Water the State hoodie, or a book. So that's what every guest gets.
I'll take a book and I'll buy a hoodie.
Oh, okay, that sounds good. That sounds
good.
Yep,
absolutely. So let me know when it's ready.
I will. You have an amazing rest of your week, okay?
Thank you. You too.
All right.
Yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye.